It is time. The biggest week of the year to date is here, and we're going to talk about it. Andy Backstrom on the other side of that screen and Spencer Holbrook. It is Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you, Andy. I dare you. I know you're itching to try them. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins because you'll need them, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. Andy, man, it's finally here. We've been watching Ohio State kick the you-know-what out of so many teams here these last 5 games, and now we finally get to see the Buckeyes play one of the big boys. How you feeling, man?
It's 2v3. It's college game day. It's a somewhat primetime affair. Like, it's primetime on the East Coast where a lot of people will be watching back in Columbus, but 4:30 kick in Eugene. So we'll get a little nighttime action in Autzen Stadium. 54,000 capacity. I think we're excited to see how loud that gets. Having covered a team that has a capacity of 44,500 at Boston College, I know it can still get pretty loud. Maybe not as loud as you could get in Beaver Stadium or the Horseshoe or the Big House, but still pretty darn loud. So I'm really excited to be there. I've never been in the Pacific Northwest. I don't think you have either, or I guess maybe briefly. So we're excited for the trip and for the first West Coast Big Ten road game for Ohio State.
I was in the Pacific Northwest for 3 business days in 2003. I won't tell you how old I was. I won't tell the crowd how old I was because I think somebody will think, man, Spencer's so young, or hey, I'm so old. But
does that count as a business day if you're that young?
So that's why I called it a business day, because my dad, David, who's definitely watching, how's it going, Dad? He was out there for a full week for business. So my mom and my little sister, who was 3, and I flew out to Seattle halfway through my dad's work conference week, and we spent 3 days in Seattle. It was, I believe it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we flew home first thing Friday morning. So yeah, it really was like almost like a business trip, because we got to go like see a couple things, have some fun. Pike Place fish market, went to the Seattle Aquarium, went up in the Space Needle. I still got a little t-shirt that obviously doesn't fit me anymore. And then we flew back home. But the bottom line is I've never been to Oregon, which is something that I'm really excited for, because it'll be state number 38 for me. So I'm making my way through. This one's obviously a little bit of a business trip, but I think you and I are going to manage to have a little bit of fun while we're out there in the Pacific Northwest, see some cool things, meet some cool people, and watch the Bucks and the Ducks.
Yeah, full disclosure, we'll start in Seattle. My brother lives out in Seattle. He's been there for 3 years. He's at University of Washington doing his PhD. So I actually haven't been out there to see him yet. So we're going to do that first, and then we'll get our way over to Portland and then go to Eugene for Saturday on the game. And I think we're going to get there pretty early just to see the campus and kind of get the feel for things. We've also heard that traffic can be pretty tough on game day. So we want to get there early, make sure we are there in the press box as early as possible so we can give you all the best coverage we can.
Absolutely. We're also going to meet up with Scoop Ducks Justin Hopkins, because I've never met Justin before, but he seems like a great time. And so I think he's going to have a tailgate. We might have to stop and see him. And I would assume he's probably watching this, trying to learn more about the Bucks. We're going to talk about it. Ohio State and Oregon, 7:30 on NBC, 4:30 Pacific if you're going out there. I want to start with this because we've got an hour to talk about this. We're not going to talk of too many other games. We'll talk a couple of them, obviously Red River, things like that at the end. But we're going to do almost a full hour here talking about the Buckeyes. Andy, what do you expect the Ohio State turnout to be? I'm very curious. It's an expensive trip, but it's also one of those that you really don't want to miss if you're a traveling Buckeyes fan. If you go to a lot of these road games, maybe put off that State College trip this year. Maybe you don't go to Wrigley, to Northwestern, or maybe you do as well, because it's a shorter trip. This one's a pretty expensive one, but I think for a lot of Ohio State fans, they had this thing circled. And so I just wondered, are we going to see 10,000 of the 54 in Autzen be Ohio State fans? Is it going to be more like 5,000? I know it's going to be between 5 and 10. I just don't know where we land on that and how much scarlet and gray we're going to see.
Yeah, I think, Ohio State fans travel for anything. Like they'll travel for the bowl games as well. Out west, you get them to the Rose Bowl. I know a couple postseasons ago, or even just this past postseason, there was concern about if Ohio State went to the Rose Bowl, how many people would travel because they'd just been there for the end of the 2021 season against Utah. But I think for a game like this, people will travel. I think you're right. It'll probably be around that 10,000 seat mark for Ohio State fans. And that's a really good thing. It's still going to be an Oregon crowd. Let's be clear. Like this is their home field. They
Yep.
sell this place out. They're a really good football team. That program has a lot of history, especially recently. That's filled with success. So, but yeah, I mean, Ohio State fans always travel, and actually, I think the people who are making this trip are also the people who are probably going to find their way to State College and also go to the Wrigley, game against Northwestern. Like usually, those people who are willing to take that jump and take that flight are probably trying to hit most of the road games. So it's a cool thing. I think that's one of the coolest things about covering Ohio State. You see people come from everywhere, even the hoops games, other sports too. They travel, and you can't really go anywhere without seeing an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, I'm gonna have some stuff to hand out to Ohio State fans. Will be out in Eugene. They make the trip, they get something from Lettermen Row, man. That's just the way that it is. Because that's a long way, and we're excited to see Ohio State fans out there. Ohio State fans, if you're in Eugene, seriously, let us know. We would love to, say hi, come to a tailgate, hang out. It's a long way, and everybody making the trip from the greatest state in the union out to Oregon, going to be in for a treat, I think. Let's talk about Autzen Stadium because I thought it was really interesting on Tuesday. Chip Kelly talks about how special a place it was. At that time of day, it's a truly special place, I think is what he said. He talked about how loud it can be. I've heard people say that it's the biggest game in Autzen Stadium history. I expect Ohio State to be able to handle it because Ohio State, like we say all the time, goes into State College and handles business, goes into Michigan Stadium, and, that place isn't that loud because the sound just escapes it, even though there's 110,000 people there, which isn't the fault of Michigan fans. I know that'll become a thing. But like this place is loud, and I expect Ohio State to at least have some sort of, whether Will Howard has to constantly put his hands over his head to hear Chip Kelly talk to him or something. Like I expect this crowd to be absolutely electric, and especially because NBC is giving them time to, I don't know, how do I say this? Drink.
Yeah, certainly. And maybe that can lead to our keys of the game because I think Ohio State's going to need to rely on its silent count for the offensive line. And one thing that really stuck out to me talking to the offensive line this offseason was a conversation we had with Josh Fryer, who was very candid about how he just wasn't good enough on the road in those silent count situations, something he wanted to work on. And I think that goes across the board. And now, I asked Ryan Day on Tuesday with a more experienced offensive line, like how much of an advantage can that be to have guys who have played like last year 6 games on the road? You had to go to Notre Dame Stadium, you had to go to the Big House. You had those challenges of big time road games. Now you can use those to your advantage. You have someone at center in Seth McLaughlin who played in very big games in the SEC, played in the college football playoff. So I think that all can be an advantage. But again, that's going to be so key because it's going to be loud in there. As you said, they're going to need that silent count. It's going to be so reliant on the communication with Seth McLaughlin, with Will Howard, making the right calls at the line. And again, as we're going to get into in this hour-long discussion, it's just the pressure that Oregon can bring is more intense than the pressure we've seen from the first 5 opponents this season. They're a top 50 team in pressure rate. They're not a top 10, but they certainly know how to get to the passer. I mean, they have the reigning Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week in Jordan Birch, who's coming off a 2.5 sack game. So they have ability to get to the quarterback, and that silent count is going to be really key.
Yeah, I mean, he's finally living up to that 5-star billing that he had coming out of high school when he went to South Carolina and then transferred out to Oregon. Like, you're finally seeing what, everybody thought he could be coming out of high school. There up front for the Ducks. You've also got Derek Harmon, who visited Ohio State this offseason as a potential transfer. Obviously, the Buckeyes with Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams. If they had Derek Harmon, you'd probably kiss the national title goodbye for everyone else. Like, it'd be so ridiculous up front. But he's at Oregon, so like now Ohio State has to block him. And Seth McLaughlin versus Derek Harmon's going to be just awesome to watch. You've also got Mateo Uiagalelei, who's starting to really come into his own there on the defensive line. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the interior and outside, just because, he's kind of a little bit of a chess piece with his athleticism. It's a really, really strong front, and I think we're going to agree about the key. I don't know if there's anywhere else you can go to start this. Like, if Ohio State doesn't and can't block Oregon up front, the game's over. I think that is so key. This Ohio State offensive line has taken strides, like real legit strides all season so far. Can they do it one more time before the off week and take the step from blocking this fundamentally sound Iowa front to this ridiculously athletic, physical Oregon front? And if they can do that, I feel really, really good about Ohio State coming back to Columbus with a win. If they can't, you're in trouble.
So Ohio State has given up only 4 sacks in 5 games, and a few of those are attributed to the Devin Brown-led offense late in games with the second teamers. So that's not even a full picture of what this first-team offensive line has done really well in pass protection, as well as, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins pass blocking for Will Howard. But what's really interesting is, if you go to PFF and you look at the pressure stats, there is no quarterback in the FBS who has been pressured less than Will Howard. He's only been pressured on 15.3% of his dropbacks. That's among quarterbacks with at least 15 pressure dropbacks. It's a pretty low standard. So again, that includes pretty much all of the major quarterbacks that you've seen this season, well over 100 quarterbacks there. So fewest pressures, so 15.3%. So he really has not faced a ton of pressure. And, it's not that he can't do that. He was at Kansas State for 4 years where he didn't have all of the weapons around him. He did face pressure. He did have times where he had to be the hero and he had to escape and make something happen out of nothing. But so far this year, in the small sample size, of those 21 dropbacks under pressure, 5 completions, 16 attempts, 1 pick, 34 yards. Not great, but again, small sample size. And it's just something to keep in mind with this matchup. He's probably going to face more pressure. Even if the Ohio State offensive line does a really good job in protection, it's inevitable that in a key spot in this game, whether it's a 3rd and long, whether it's a 4th down, whether it's in the red zone, he's going to face some pressure. And he talked about this week that he needs to stand in the pocket and make the throw, which I thought was really interesting, because when people think about dual threat quarterbacks like Will Howard, and you hear Ryan Day talk about how the X factor is his legs, you might think, oh, he needs to scramble out of the pocket and make a throw on the run. He needs to do something out of structure. Will Howard's answer was, I need to stand in the pocket and make the throw and not be afraid to do so and set my feet. And I think that was really interesting to hear him say.
That is just great stuff. I don't think you're going to get that anywhere else. Just full breakdown of Will Howard under pressure, like just fantastic stuff. I don't even know how to respond to that. My brain is just being filled with knowledge right now. And when fans watch this and then watch Saturday night and Will Howard completes like a dart across the middle to Emeka Buka to move the chains on 3rd and 7 when he's facing some pressure, it's like, oh yeah, Andy Backstrom told me that was going to happen. Well,
he's certainly going to be in that situation. I mean, I can't guarantee Will's going to make the throw, but he's like, he's got to do that, right? That's the challenge.
Yeah.
That is this. I said it last week, and every week is a referendum on Will Howard, and this is going to be the new test. How does he respond to pressure? And we talked about this yesterday. I'm writing about this week for LettermenRow.com. He's facing the metaphorical pressure, right? This is the biggest game he's had in his career, at least in the regular season. He did play in a Big 12 title game. And also physically, he could be under more pressure than he has all season. So he's got to respond. And that's why he came to Ohio State to play in these games.
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait to read it. I'm just going to, again, my brain is going to be fried with knowledge. It's going to be awesome. I'll go another key to the game. I think Tyleik Williams is one of the just biggest X factors to this game. If you're going to stop the run without selling out, Ohio State's done a really good job of that. But last week they did sell out, stop the run. I mean, wouldn't you against Iowa? You can't really do that to that extent against Oregon. And I don't expect Ohio State to. I expect Ohio State to have the full playbook when I don't think they've used the full playbook this year because they haven't had to, especially against Iowa. They didn't use the full playbook. It was either engage 8 and pressure Cade McNamara, or it was get home with 4 and sit back in the zone sit back in coverage because you knew that they weren't going to beat you over the top, and you could really put some stress on the Iowa run game. If you do that against Oregon, they're going to throw it over the top, score 6, and the crowd's going to go nuts. So, like, you can't do that this time. You have to be able to stop, I think it's Jordan James, and in that running game. You have to be able to contain Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Terrence Ferguson, this passing game. That's a lot easier said than done. I think it all starts in the interior of the defensive line, because Oregon's defensive or offensive front, that interior, that offensive line, all 3 guard, center, guard, all great in the 60s on PFF. That's not the end-all, be-all. But if you watch the games, you kind of see that story being told as you watch Oregon. The interior of that offensive line, I think, is not soft in the way that, like, soft versus tough. But I think there's like some ways to get after those guys on the interior. And that could be the difference in this game. If Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton, but more so Tyleik because he's such a game changer on the interior, if he can get up the middle and apply some pressure, whether it be on throws to Dylan Gabriel or whether it be disrupting running lanes for Jordan James, making that vision cloudy for him as he tries to squirt through something, I really think that he can be the X factor. So one of my keys to the game, I don't really do this very often, but I'm going to single out one guy. And I think one of the keys to the game is Tyleik Williams has to play All-American football. And if he does, I think Ohio State's got a really good chance of slowing down what Oregon wants to do offensively.
He's so important, and I think we saw that in the 2 games he was absent. His presence, or his lack thereof, his absence, was really felt, and it's no insult to the guys who had to step up. I think, as we talked about before, they can be serviceable in their rotational roles, but Tyleik Williams, there's no replacement right now at that 3-tech position for Ohio State. So I really like that pick. And maybe it shows up more in run defense, like you're talking about. Maybe you make Oregon one-dimensional and throw the football. And they can still win that way, to be honest. And it's really hard to get pressure on Dylan Gabriel. And that's the really intriguing thing about this Oregon offense. And really wherever Dylan Gabriel's been. I mean, even at Oklahoma, it was the same way. They get the ball out really quickly with him throwing the football. And to look at the stats, breaking down his passing, it's fascinating, right? Like, he's most of the time kept clean, like 83 or 80.3% of the time he's kept clean. And his average time to throw on those attempts is 2.3 seconds. So it's snap, 1, 2, out. Snap, 1, 2, out. Like, it's just incredibly quick. And, people might say, well, then he never throws the ball downfield. Well, yeah, his average depth of target is lower than most quarterbacks, but he's got 8 completions with 20-plus air yards. He's got 16 completions between the 10 and 19 mark. So he can push the ball down the field. Now, what's really interesting, and you actually pointed this out, I think it was last week, Friday night, when they're playing Michigan State, he never throws to the right side. And at first I thought, like, maybe you're just being hyperbolic, or maybe this is just like, a bit of a generalization. And I went into the data and, like, you were so right. So he has never attempted this season a 20-plus air yard attempt on the deep right side of the field. He has only 6 such attempts from 10 to 19 yards on the right side. That's fewest directionally. Only 5 attempts between 0 and 9 yards on the right side. That's also the fewest directionally. And then behind the line of scrimmage, only 1 attempt on the right side. And that's also the fewest directionally. So, I don't know what you do with that as a defense. Like, I don't know if that is a tip or something that you key in on to try to force him to that side. Again, this is a quarterback who's in his 6th year. Like, he knows what he's doing, and what works for him works for him. But he's a very interesting case study. It's not surprising to me he had to come back. Like, it makes more sense why maybe the NFL wasn't in love with everything that he does, because I don't know how much it translates to maybe being a starter. But he is really incredible in the way he gets the ball out quick, and he certainly is highly accurate. But again, part of that's because most of his throws are behind the line, or 0 to 9 yards, or maybe 10 to 19.
Well, let me tell you something about Dylan Gabriel, because in the biggest games, he tends to play really well. He had 14 carries for 113 yards and a touchdown last year against Texas. Oklahoma was number 12 in the country. Texas was number 3. That's a Texas team that, if something goes a different way in the final seconds, was playing against Michigan in the national championship game. So, like, this is a guy who can beat you. He was 23 of 38 in that game, 285 yards and a touchdown. the ESPN QBR metric, I think, is pretty decent. I don't think it's the end all be all, but it does tell you like how a guy plays in situations. He had a 91 QBR in that game, like very, very good. And people say that Will Howard, can be a gamer at times. I think Dylan Gabriel was like the prime example of a gamer. Yeah, he throws to the left side, but guess what? That Oklahoma-Texas game, I went and rewatched it, and it was right after. It was actually a couple days after we were talking about that last weekend. Dylan Gabriel only throws to the left side. I go watch the Oklahoma-Texas game to get a feel for like, okay, what's Dylan Gabriel do against these good teams that makes him so dangerous in these big matchups? Final drive, Texas had just kicked a field goal. Oklahoma starts the drive with a deep, they're on the left hash. They throw a deep out route on the right side of the field to the right sideline to Jalil Farouk. And Dylan Gabriel throws a rope all the way across the field, across his body to the right side of the field. And even the good Texas corners from last year, did not defend it. He threw a really good ball, and it was like a 20-yard gain for a first down to start that drive. And it just got me thinking, like, he doesn't throw to the right side, but he obviously can throw to the right side. And to the average depth of target point, I mean, if you look at the advanced numbers, and I don't want to make this too advanced numbers because we kind of have these first 20 minutes, but also like it's kind of why we do this. His average depth of target against Idaho, 4.5 yards. They're getting him into a rhythm. Boise State, it goes up to 8.6. Oregon State, they don't really need it because they move the ball pretty well, 6.5. UCLA, easy game, doesn't even matter, 5.4. And then against Michigan State last week, 9.9. They saw that they could attack Michigan State vertically. I don't know if they're going to see that they can attack Ohio State vertically because of how talented this secondary is. I would expect that ADOT to be way down against Ohio State because you're going to want to get it out quickly because you know that you're not going to block Ohio State as easily. You're going to want to get your playmakers in space because you'd rather them try to miss a tackle, to force a missed tackle than to go one-on-one up in the air against these Ohio State corners, especially because these receivers are kind of smaller receivers for Oregon. I just think this is going to be a very quick game for Oregon in the passing game. And so my key to the game is I'm going to turn this into a key to the game. When you can pressure him, you have to pressure him because it's not going to come very often where you're going to get an opportunity to pressure him because I think they're going to get the ball out so quickly in this matchup specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think for Oregon, even if the run game doesn't take off, with Jordan James and Noah Whittington, you can use the horizontal pass game, which they love, as a substitute for the run game. And I think we've seen Ohio State do that at times, less so this year because the run game is kind of cooking right now. But I think in 22, at times, and certainly in 23, there was a lot of that to kind of get things going and kind of have a substitute for the traditional run game. So wouldn't be surprised we see that. Dylan Gabriel's already attempted 36 screen passes this year. So get ready for more on Saturday. But that whole receiving crew is really fascinating to me from Oregon. Tej Johnson is the name to know. 43 catches so far. He had, I believe, 86 last year, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. This year, he's well on his way to another 1,000-yard season. Also returned an 85-yard punt for a touchdown against Boise State. They had 2 special teams touchdowns in that game, and that's another key for me is special teams. They got to be good. Oregon's a team that can turn the game in special teams. That's why they kind of skated by Boise State was special teams. In a game they had the answer.
It was the reason. They had 2 return touchdowns in that game and won by 7.
Yeah, one of which was it was dropped by Noah Whittington on his way to the end zone. He made it pretty much 100 yards, and then they recovered it and scored a touchdown anyway. But special teams, yeah. I mean, it was good against Iowa. It was good pretty much all the way this season, aside from the Marshall game where Jaden Fielding had 3 straight kicks go out of bounds. It feels like he's put that in the rearview mirror. I don't know what that was, but it's gone now. So he seems to be fine. And, but this is a game where maybe you do have to make a kick. And we talk about Ohio State's red zone success, right? 21 trips, 20 touchdowns, 1 field goal. You get the sense that they're going to need to kick a few at some point. Maybe in a game like this, Jaden Fielding's got to step up. Joe McGuire's got to be able to flip the field if he needs to. Punting the football, he's been pretty good so far this season, but will certainly be in a greater spotlight. And again, in those return games, like the kickoff coverage team and the punt coverage team, they're also going to be under the microscope against Oregon.
Very quickly, back to just a quick passing game from Oregon, because I just did a little bit of looking up as we were talking about that because it sparked my interest. Denzel Burke, 2 missed tackles this year. Jordan Hancock, 1 missed tackle this year. Davis Nickmanosin, 2 missed tackles this year. Caleb Downs, 3 missed tackles, all of them in the opener. He hasn't missed a tackle since the opener. And then Lathan Ransom, 2 missed tackles this year, or 3, 2 of them in the opener against Akron. These guys tackle really well. Absolute necessity this week. But like you said, I didn't want to spend too much time on that, but special teams, let's get back to that. So important. If you feel like you took an entire offseason, which Ohio State tells us that they did, to revamp the special teams and make it look not disastrous like it did last year, prove it. Oregon is very, very good on special teams. It's not just that they return things. It's just like they execute well. I think it's one of the things they do really well. And it's not just returning kicks and punts against Boise State. It seems like they're just a good, solid group on special teams. You have to be good, because if you're not, they will change the game. Boise State thought that they had Oregon, and then Oregon returned to kick, and then returned to punt, and then returned to kick. Boise State thought they had Oregon in Autzen, and that place completely became unhinged on that kick return toward the end of that game. So, like, if you're not careful, just when you think you have the Ducks down, they return one. And so even if it's not a touchdown, Andy, like even if it's out to the 50, that can change the game. Because, let's say Ohio State scores on the opening possession. You kick to Oregon, they return it to the 50. Guess what? That crowd doesn't care that Ohio State just scored because they think Oregon's going to go down on a short field and score now. It's like you have to be so, so good on special teams. And that's the challenge for Rob Keyes and for Gunnar Daniel and for the rest of the special team staff and for Brian Hartline and Keenan Bailey and Tim Walton, all these guys that they've put in charge of this operation, this apparatus. I know you want to win the game on offense and defense, but you have to be keying in on special teams this week. And I think Ohio State understands that.
Certainly. I think moving on to the Oregon defense, the secondary of Oregon is definitely the stiffest competition that Will Howard and this passing attack has faced so far. And I know, we can go through some of these guys because it's pretty impressive what they've done so far this season. And, you look at Jabbar Muhammad, who they added from Washington. I'm sure many people are aware of what he did last year with that national runner-up team. But so far this year, he's been pretty sound as well. Targeted 26 times, only 12 receptions given up, 1 touchdown allowed, and he has 6 passes defended. So he's kind of the keystone of that secondary there. Their safeties really haven't been too involved in coverage, and that's kind of a testament to, the shots they've taken away. And I think that's something that's been talked about with Jim Knowles, right? Like, you don't see Caleb Downs in coverage a lot because teams aren't taking the shots because they're not there. So those safeties, you got Kobe Savage, you got Tysheem Johnson, who's often in the box and in the slot as well. They can do a lot of good things as well. But I think Jabbar, Muhammad is the name to know in that secondary.
Yeah, he's really good. He's really good. Kobe Savage is interesting because he's very, very, very good friends with Will Howard. Will has brought him up a couple times now. I think as he refers to him as my boy Kobe back in the secondary because, he's from Kansas State. They won a Big 12 championship together at Kansas State. Like, some real ties there. And I think that's going to be really interesting. If Will Howard knows one thing, it's Kobe Savage. And if Kobe Savage knows one thing, it's Will Howard. Like, they know each other. It's like, I think that's a really interesting little matchup there.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, Kobe Savage knowing Will Howard's eye discipline and Will Howard knowing, looking a guy off that he's looked off in practice, however many times that K-State goes good on good during their careers. There's like, I love those kind of things. But that's not the only thing. Like, Will Howard has to now throw into Jabbar Muhammad. He has to worry about the defensive line coming in on him. Like, this Oregon secondary is impressive. I was talking to somebody who with really good knowledge of the Oregon team at Big Ten Media Days, and they were very adamant that they would take this Oregon secondary over this Ohio State secondary. I would never prescribe to that. This Ohio State secondary is ridiculous. But there are people who do, in their own world, think Oregon has a better secondary than Ohio State. So that's the challenge for Ohio State, is figuring out how to crack the code here. Now, the code might just be hit the Jeremiah button, hit the Emeka button, and go score touchdowns. And that may be the case, because if that's the case, then I'm going to start to talk about this team as like one of the best teams ever, because if Oregon can't defend them in the secondary, I don't think anybody can defend them in the secondary, because I've seen the Alabama secondary. It doesn't look great. I've seen the Georgia secondary. It doesn't look great. They'll be able to throw on Texas. And then like Michigan's secondary, as good as it is, I think Ohio State's going to have success there. So like, if they can throw on Oregon, they'll throw on anybody. And so that's the thing here is like, if you walk out of Autzen Stadium on Saturday night, or if you go to bed after watching a rapid reaction from Autzen Stadium at Lettermen Row on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel, you think, man, Ohio State threw all over those guys. You should be just extremely confident that Ohio State's going to do some things the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that the Oregon secondary and pass defense in general has been good. I don't know if it's been as great as they would want it to be so far. They're 6th in the Big Ten in passing yards allowed, which again is still you're close to the top of the country. You're in the top 3rd in pass defense at that point, because the Big Ten is so good in general with defense. But they have given up 5 passes of 30 or more yards total on those completions. Ohio State's given up 0 of those. So talk about explosive plays given up. Ohio State has done a really good job for the 2nd year in a row of eliminating those. There are times where Oregon will give up that chunk passing play downfield. So there are openings there for Ohio State to push the ball downfield and Will Howard. So I don't think it's out of the question that they can throw on Oregon. It's just that they definitely have the talent. They have the transfers they've brought in. It's the guys that have been there for a bit that can make a difference back there. And that defense at really every level is intriguing for me. I think it's certainly the defensive front and how athletic they are, and then the defensive backs and what they do back there that stands out the most. Not to discredit the linebackers. You mentioned, Mateo Uyunglele is an outside linebacker. They move around. They have a couple outside linebackers that are pretty versatile. So not to discredit those guys that sometimes hang back in the second level. But for me, it's the defensive front of Oregon. It's a backfield that stand out the most.
Well, yeah, Mateo's such a chess piece. Like, I think he's kind of what Ohio State wants a couple of its linebackers to be, like defensive end linebacker, just kind of moves around. I really like him a lot. And to be honest, he should probably be playing in scarlet and gray, if we're being honest with ourselves. But I think he's just a tremendous player. But yeah, the secondary, definitely something to watch. Again, if Ohio State's having success on this Oregon secondary, you should feel very, very, very confident in Ohio State moving forward.
Yeah.
But you know what I feel confident in? That if you go to Wendy's and you have the nuggets covered in sauce, you will be satisfied, because you've had the nuggets dipped in sauce, but you haven't had them covered in sauce. I know you haven't, but you need to go do it. If you're watching this video, go do it. Wendy's new saucy nugs. Take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, like Shane is in the comments, I know you're watching, Shane, try some spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's locations. Saucy nug of the week, Andy. That's where we're at now. I've got a really, really, really saucy nug for you here.
Let's hear it.
Let's hear it. All right. Now, this needs context, because obviously everything has changed in college football. The Oregon Ducks, in that famed special, as Chip Kelly called it, Autzen Stadium, are 10-4 against top 10 conference opponents, straight up and against the spread. 10-4. That's a pretty good record against top 10 opponents when you're at home. Now, we take that with a grain of salt here on this program, because that was against top 10 USC, top 10 Stanfords, top 10 Washingtons. Ohio State, I think we can agree, has more depth of talent, and not like discrediting those other top 10 teams that Oregon has faced, more depth of good quality talent than those 3 teams. And I know that Washington team was really good last year. This doesn't apply to them because Oregon played at Washington last year. So Oregon 10-4 at home, straight up and against the spread against top 10 conference opponents. But that's the Pac-12. This is the Big Ten. So I just think that's really, really interesting. You see that kind of stat, you're like, whoa, that's a little crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is crazy. But testament to the home environment they have there, how hostile it is. But again, as you mentioned, like, so much is different about Oregon now than certainly when they were in the Pac-12, but even more so different than when Chip Kelly was there as head coach. And I think there were a lot of questions at the press conference this week about Chip Kelly's ties to Oregon. And that's fine. I mean, it is a cool story, him going back. It's not his first time back. Of course, he coached at UCLA for a bit. And, he was there for like half a decade. So he made some return trips to Autzen as well, being in the same conference as Oregon. But even Chip Kelly said, like, look, this is a different Oregon team, different footprint. Chip Kelly's different in the way he coaches. There's so much different about this program, and Oregon's had chapters beyond Chip Kelly. There was the whole Mario Cristobal era. There was Mark Helfrich, right, as well, that was there. And then, of course, now Dan Lanning. And so there's been chapters beyond Chip Kelly. And I think sometimes in our head, it's like, oh, well, Chip Kelly was so recent. That was quite a long time ago now. So much has changed. And not only just within the last year of changing from Pac-12 to Big Ten.
Well, and he, again, like Chip said on Tuesday, and I thought he did a good job of this. And Chip is great with the media. He always gives a lot of credit to people not named Chip Kelly. But, he credited a lot of what he did at Oregon to Mike Bellotti and Rich Brooks, who came before him at Oregon, which includes like the Joey Harrington era, which includes like a lot of success that they had at Oregon far before, Chip Kelly was there. Now, Ohio State also went out to Oregon once, way before Chip Kelly in 1967. This is only the second trip out to Autzen for Ohio State. That's my second saucy nugget of the week. Like, how have these two programs only met twice in Autzen? Like, they've played 10 times. One of them, obviously, in the national championship game. I don't think I need to remind Ohio State fans of that game. Maybe I need to remind some of them because they might not remember what happened once Ohio State won the game from that night, because there was a lot of celebration going on around this great state. But they've only played twice in Autzen Stadium. That is just bananas to me. How's that possible? That's my second saucy nug. I'll go a double dip with the saucy nuggets, if you will, because
George Costanza.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Let's go with we do this player to watch every single week. Usually it's freshman to watch or a younger guy to watch, but if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't think the young guys are going to play. So who's I've already named Tyler Williams. I'll go with a different one, I promise. Who's a guy that you've really got your eye on this week that you're just like, man, if he plays well, Ohio State's going to do well?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it kind of depends whoever is lined up against Jordan Birch. That defensive line, we've talked about it from Oregon. So for me, it's going to be one of those tackles. It's either going to be Josh Fryer or it's going to be Josh Simmons. I'm going to go with Josh Fryer just because he's been open about his struggles last year on the road a little bit. And, we know he didn't play the way he wanted to against Michigan and Ann Arbor last season. And, there were times in other road games where he wasn't at his best. And I think this will be a challenge for him. He's been a lot better this year, in my opinion. There's been a few moments where you're like, okay, that wasn't great. But overall, I think he's taken that step. He looks so much more athletic and he's got better bend. And I think in pass protection this week, this is going to be a big challenge for him. But I think if he passes this test, you're feeling really good about your right tackle going forward. So I'm picking Josh Fryer. I think he needs to be on his A game for this one. And let's see if he got the silent counting down this time around.
That's a great pick. So I trust these Ohio State corners defending anything, like anybody. Maybe not Jeremiah Smith, but we saw Davis Igbenogson win reps against Jeremiah Smith. So I trust these corners. I trust them a lot. I also trust Jordan Hancock against tight ends, even though he's probably going to be smaller in that matchup. So I'm going to go with Jordan Hancock as a guy that I just think has to have just a great game. Because if he is on Terrence Ferguson, like I think he's going to be on Terrence Ferguson in a matchup, that's going to be so huge. Ohio State has not covered the tight end well, but it's because the two teams that they've played that have thrown quite frequently to the tight end, they've done it against a 4-3 look for Ohio State. Even when Oregon goes heavy, I would assume Ohio State's going to keep Jordan Hancock on the field because of the way that Oregon will spread you out from their heavier looks. Like even when Oregon is heavy, it's not like they're just going to run the ball like Iowa is, or it's not like they, kind of reduce the field like Michigan State does. They do everything they want to do, even with a tight end on the field. I don't think this is a 4-3 game for Ohio State. I think it's a 4-2-5 game for Ohio State, which means Jordan Hancock needs to be a huge part of the game plan. I think whether it's him blitzing, like we've seen in the past in these big games, from Jim Knowles, or whether it's him on Terrence Ferguson, or whether it's him just in coverage, just being a ball hawk, or, making tackles in open space when Oregon tries to get the ball out quickly. He has got to be so good. I really know that Caleb Downs is going to be good because he's Caleb Downs. Lathan Ransom has proven time and time again that he's going to be good. Jordan's done the same thing, but I just think that matchup's going to be a little more pronounced with Ferguson as the tight end, because I think I really, really like what Terrence Ferguson does. But then also the reason that I'm picking him is because if he can cover Terrence Ferguson in this Oregon offense, I think it says really good things about what Ohio State's capabilities are in covering Tyler Warren when they play Penn State in a few weeks. And that's, if Ohio State wins this game, that's probably going to be a top 5 matchup, because I don't see Penn State losing before then. If they cover Terrence Ferguson well, I think Jordan Hancock and the rest of this defense will be really well suited to cover Colston Loveland, in the Michigan game. Even though Michigan doesn't pass the ball well, when they do, it goes to Loveland. You're going to learn a lot about if Ohio State can do that against 2 really good tight ends down the stretch, if they can do it against this Oregon one. So I'm going to take Jordan Hancock.
Great point, because we've seen a lot of the 4-3 recently. So pretty much most of the game against Iowa, and a good part of it, or at least the beginning of the game against Michigan State, you had to, kind of get the sense that they were testing that out, trying to get it on film, see what it looked like against Michigan State, and then certainly had to deploy it against Iowa with all those 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets. And I think it worked a lot better against Iowa. But again, it's a different challenge because that passing game was just, not as potent as Michigan State's, even though Michigan State's passing offense is pretty Jekyll and Hyde. But,
yeah,
you get the point. And so I like that one. It's a good pick. But look, this is a Will Howard game. Will Howard needs to be good. And this is why he came to Ohio State, is to play these games. And really, he's going to win or lose the big games for Ohio State. And that sounds super black and white and maybe a little unfair, but that's what the quarterback position is. That's why you come to Ohio State. He's embraced and leaned into the pressure of it ever since he arrived in January. He has not been afraid to be like, I know what this comes with. I know what I signed up for. I am excited for it, and I'm looking forward to it. He repeated that this week. And, I think that's the way to go. But now, you can say what you need to say, but you need to put it on the field. He knows that. And this is a challenge for him. And if he plays really well, all of a sudden, maybe he's in the Heisman conversation. All of a sudden, maybe he is rising up draft boards. Like, this is a real opportunity for him. But conversely, if he doesn't play well, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's overreactions from fans, and maybe not even overreactions. Maybe you do need to evaluate a little bit. But he's been so good so far that it's so hard, because, if you went into this game and he was just a little bit off or okay through 5 games, then maybe you'd be like, is this, what do we have here? He's been so solid that even if he were to have a bit off of a performance, you'd still have to stick with him. I mean, he's still your guy. He's been so good so far. So, I don't think it's anything like that, maybe, that we were looking at the beginning of the season of circling this game as like, oh, like, is this going to be like a turning point? I think he's got this in lock, but he still has to play really well. And I think this is a huge moment for him in his career, like NFL draft stock wise as well.
I'm not going to go on like a rant, but I've been scratching my head the entire freaking season so far. And even in the preseason. All right, here's the deal. Dylan Gabriel is a good quarterback. Right now, he's plus 1,400 to win the Heisman. Will Howard is plus 5,000. Will Howard has 1,248 touchdowns, or 1,248 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Dylan Gabriel, 1,449. He has 201 more passing yards than Will Howard, with 1 fewer touchdown and the same amount of interceptions. Am I taking crazy pills or something? Because I don't see that big of a value proposition in the difference between what Dylan Gabriel is doing for his Heisman campaign right now to be in the top 5 of the Heisman odds and what Will Howard's doing. Will Howard has been awesome for Ohio State. Will Howard has a rushing touchdown in 4 straight games. He's been fantastic for the Buckeyes. And I continue to see the narrative that okay, I guess I am going on a little bit of a rant here. I continue to see the narrative that Dillon Gabriel is this Heisman contender who's leading the Oregon offense, who's just been incredible so far. He has 200 more passing yards and 1 fewer touchdown. What is he doing different right now than what Will Howard is doing? Nothing. His average depth of target is smaller. He's throwing to fewer. Obviously, Will Howard has better playmakers, and I fully understand that. But if you're going to give Dillon Gabriel all of this Heisman buzz, to have him in the top 5 of the Heisman Trophy race right now, and you know what? I really don't care about the Heisman Trophy. If the fans knew how the voting process worked, they wouldn't care about it either. But they keep how the voting works kind of under wraps a little bit, so to make you care about it more. So we don't really care, but like it bothers me because I see how hard Will Howard works and I see how good he's been. And yeah, Dillon Gabriel is a good quarterback. But where is this buzz on Dillon Gabriel? And where is this buzz on Will Howard? And why is it all being shifted to Dillon Gabriel when Will Howard has been just as good, if not better? He hasn't thrown 2 red zone interceptions against a terrible Michigan State team. Like, come on, man. Am I just taking crazy pills or what?
Well, in fairness, he almost did throw one.
Well, almost only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades.
Yeah. No, look, Will Howard's been good, but I think it's understandable why this has happened. Dillon Gabriel was great at Oklahoma last year. Had good success the year previous to that at Oklahoma. When you have prolific stats year after year, you go into the next year with more hype. And Will Howard had a pretty good year at Kansas State, but it wasn't as good Dillon Gabriel had at Oklahoma. And expectations were that Dillon Gabriel was going to have an outstanding year at Oregon this year. And, people just didn't really know what to expect from Will Howard at Ohio State. Things will play themselves out. I hear you. I should be closer. Yeah, Will Howard, 16 total touchdowns. He's done everything you would want. He's been very good. But kind of my point of bringing this up is that this is his chance to kind of write his story, or at least start doing that. No one's really taken, for better or worse, fair or unfair, no one's really taken what Ohio State has done seriously from the national perspective. I think locally, everyone knows how dominant they've been, and we've all watched it and covered it. But nationally, there's this perception that they haven't played anyone, that they haven't, shown their real stripes yet, which I don't agree with. We've been here, we've covered the team, but that's certainly the perception right now, and I'm sure that's reflecting in the Heisman odds. But if he goes into Autzen Stadium and he plays really well and he doesn't turn the ball over, or even if he turns the ball over once and they win, he's going to be more of a contender for that award and thought of in higher regard for the NFL draft. So this is a really big opportunity for him. And things will play themselves out. If he wins this game, if he beats Penn State on the road, if he beats Michigan, he's going to be in that conversation if he keeps playing like he is right now.
Correct. I agree. Maybe I'm too far down that path. But I just look at the narrative surrounding Ohio State. It's like, oh, they haven't played anybody. Well, okay. Oregon played Boise State, right? But if you're a top 5 team in the country, I know Boise's really good. I'm not going to dismiss Boise. Boise is my pick to make the college football playoff as the G5 opportunity. And listen, they might get the 4 seed and a bye over the Big 12 champion because the Big 12 might just be a roller derby the rest of the time. So seriously, they are really freaking good. Oregon should not have been in a complete dogfight with Boise State in Eugene for that game. And other than Boise State, the opponents that Oregon State has faced, are we really sure that they're any better than the opponents Ohio State's faced? Idaho, Oregon State, UCLA, and Michigan State. Ohio State's played Michigan State too. So I'm very confused as to, Oregon's battle tested. Well, Oregon's battle tested because they played like garbage the first 2 weeks of the year and had to be battle tested against FCS Idaho and then Boise, who they should have beaten by more. So, it's just interesting to me. That's like, well, Oregon is battle tested. Well, Oregon's battle tested because they didn't play well enough to not be battle tested. And Ohio State has played well enough to not be battle tested. So, and that is obviously scarlet and gray tinted glasses, and that's okay. That's the team I cover. Some of the things that I'm hearing this week have got me like, come on. I just feel like there's an extent to it that's a little lazy.
I'm with you. And I think, look, Oregon is not the same team as it was in those first 2 games. They gave up 7 sacks.
I agree with that.
They averaged 2.9 yards per carry and 3.0 yards per carry in those first 2 games. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't protect the passer, even with him throwing the football as quickly as he did. They brought back a lot of people, including 3 starters on the offensive line. There was serious concerns about Oregon. since then, they've found their groove a little bit. I think they're more confident going into this game, but we need to be real with this too. The reason why they're the number 3 team in the country is because there's 5 teams that lost in the top 11 last week. So they did benefit for some craziness that happened last week. They still would be top 10. They still would be a good team. It still would be an awesome matchup. But like, this is 2v3, and it's really cool that it is. But we need to keep in mind that the rankings, I don't think the AP poll should exist until this point of the season. Like I'm someone that believes that, I don't love the preseason rankings because then it affects where you're at 5 or 6 weeks down the line, even though you might not even be that good. Like Michigan's at 24 right now, and I think they're only there because they started so high. And it's like, what are we doing here? So that's kind of a tangential point. But again, Oregon's a good football team. And I think a lot of what you're seeing right now is people wrestling with perception from preseason expectations to reality. Finally, we're getting to the part of the season where reality takes over and those preseason expectations get pushed away. And that's why this is such an opportunity for Will Howard to write his own kind of story here at Ohio State, and for Ohio State to make the statement that, yeah, they are number 2 for a reason. They could even be number 1 after this week if they win in a convincing fashion, or even just win in general. So this is a huge opportunity. Big Ten title race implications, college football playoff seeding implications. And by the way, this might not be the last time they play Oregon this year.
Oh, by the way, there's a lot of recruiting implications on the trail as well. And Big Ten supremacy moving forward the rest of the 2024 season. Almost a tone setter for the future of the Big Ten with, Oregon now coming into the league and trying to be the big dog, and Ohio State trying to keep that or wrestle that title away in a way from Michigan this year. But it's clear that Michigan's taken such a step back that you think that this matchup is for Big Ten supremacy right now, and I think that's another just underlying storyline. Okay, Andy. Usually we already have talked about this before then, but with the travel schedule and everything, we haven't. Who you got, man? Like, who's going to win the freaking game? We just talked about it for 55 or 52 minutes and 11 seconds. Who's going to win?
I think Ohio State will win this game. I do think it will be close. I think this will be a 4-quarter game, and I'm really excited to watch that because we haven't really seen that from Ohio State so far this year. They've given up 34 total points. Will Howard's been able to watch the ending of every game this year from the sideline. He did play further into the 4th quarter last week against Iowa. I thought that was interesting. They kept him in the game for a little bit longer than you would think, even with some second teamers, probably just to get him used to that. I think that was intentional, but we have yet to see him really play meaningful snaps all the way through the later part of the 4th quarter. I think he'll have to do that. I don't know if he'll need a game-winning drive per se, but I think this one will be a 1-score game. And I think Ohio State will come out on the other side. But again, I also don't think this is the last time they're going to have to face Oregon. Like, I think they might have to face them again in the Big Ten title game or in the college football playoffs. So it's hard to beat a team twice, and that's something that if they do beat Oregon this time, they're going to have to wrestle with potentially down the line.
Man, I'm confident. I'm comfortable with my score. I gave out a score on Tuesday on a radio show with my uncle up at 93.1 The Fan in Lima. If you're in Northwest Ohio, fantastic content, 4 to 6 every day. I'll shameless plug for my uncle there. You've been on his show. I gave a score prediction there. I think I'm just going to stick with it, man. I feel like this Ohio State team is really ready to showcase themselves after, kind of being behind the curtain for the first few weeks of the season while Alabama, Georgia have been playing. Upsets have been happening. Oregon's been tested by Boise. Texas, goes to Michigan, gets a big win. Ohio State's just been kind of getting into the rhythm, going along. I think this is the coming out party for Ohio State. I'm going to go Ohio State 34-20, but I think that that's a 27-20 game with Ohio State getting the ball back with like 6 minutes to go and marching down the field. Quinshon Judkins or Travion punches one in, kind of does the little silence the crowd deal, and gets a second score just to put the exclamation mark on that. I think this game is going to be awesome. I think it's going to be really, really close, but I will take a score late to push this thing to leave no doubt at the end. And that that sounds like I'm predicting like a blowout, but I promise I'm not. I think that it's just going to be a late score that helps Ohio State prove, hey, we can go on the road and win these kind of games. So, get the ball back 6 minutes to go. The crowd's going to be rocking, down 7, need the ball back. Ohio State marches down the field, scores a touchdown. That's my prediction here. So I'm going to go 34-20.
Turnovers and special teams can ruin the day for Ohio State, though. And, I think look at some of the slow starts they've had. Akron game, didn't have a great first half. Iowa game, they shot themselves in the foot. Didn't have a great first half. They moved the ball, but all that matters is how many points you're scoring. And I think in a game like this, you can't afford to have those mistakes. Oregon will capitalize. They will make you pay. And I think that's the thing I'm going to be watching for is, not how many passes does Will Howard complete in a row, even though that's crazy that he's had such success in the first half, the last 4 games. He's just been on a heater, but he's had those first half hiccups as well. Does he have those? And if he does, how does he respond? He's responded pretty well so far. I don't think he needs to be like turnover free. You would obviously want that from him, but I don't think he can't recover from one. It's just that it can't be at the wrong time. It's been almost good that those have happened in the first half. We have yet to see one in a late game situation because Ohio State hasn't been in those late game situations. We saw that from Kyle McCord last year, right? Obviously the Michigan game, but even at Notre Dame, like potential interceptions were thrown on that final drive against Notre Dame. Got very lucky that a few of those weren't picked off. So Will Howard might have those moments where he's got to come down and lead a drive. Maybe it's not to win the game, but to answer a punch from Oregon or whatever, and he's got to protect the football, but also find the balance. I think that was really interesting. He talked about this week, finding the balance between wanting to make a game-changing play in a game like this, but also not wanting to do too much. And I think that has been his whole thing, bridging the gap between his time at Kansas State and his time at Ohio State. He wants to be a playmaker, but he doesn't need to be the superhero. And this is a game where he's got to find that balance.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That is the preview, I guess, of Ohio State at Oregon 2 at 3. It's going to be absolutely rocking in Austin Stadium. It's going to be awesome. There's a lot of other games going on, Andy. We're going to pick a few of them just because we do that every week, but we're going to make it kind of rapid fire just because we don't, we're so locked in on Ohio State, Oregon that these games don't really matter to us. But I think it's still worth it. We've got Sage, Ohio wants our picks, I'm sure. So we're going to give out our picks here on Thursday night. Washington at Iowa. Who you got?
I'm going Washington. Keep it rolling, Will Rogers.
Me too. I'm going Washington as well, even on the road. That Iowa offense, man, is still so bad.
Got to start Brandon Sullivan.
Yeah, you got to go. I don't know the reason to stick with McNamara. Whatever. Oklahoma, Texas.
Texas.
I think Texas, but close. Oklahoma got them last year. This game is bananas every year. It always delivers. The Red River rivalry, so fun. I would, lock in on that one before you. That's an appetizer, man. You talk about a good appetizer. That's like potato skins. Penn State, USC, which is also at 3:30. So you better double screen.
I'm going USC.
Wow.
I'm going USC. Yeah, I think. Look, it's out there, out west. Penn State, big games. I don't know, man. I just feel like USC. I don't see them taking a third loss. I think this is not a great USC team, but certainly much better USC team than last year. USC
is the job James Franklin has always wanted. So impress your future boss. Go get that job, man. Penn State's going to win that game. That's a joke. I promise it's a joke. Ole Miss at LSU, which is going to be played at the same time as Ohio State, Oregon. Don't watch that crap. That's not going to be that good of a game. Don't watch that crap. Watch Ohio State, Oregon.
I'm going Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm going Ole Miss too. I don't think LSU's that good.
Neither, but that's a fun quarterback game.
For sure. It's going to be wild. Big Big 12 implications in this one. Not a game that we've normally picked, but this year, man, this is awesome. Iowa State at West Virginia. You burning couches?
I'm going, give me the clones.
You're drinking the Busch Light rather than burning couches. I like it. I'm going Iowa State as well, but I think it's going to be close. Not so fast, my friend. Kansas State, Colorado in the nightcap. We're going to be talking to Ryan Day when this one kicks off.
Yeah, I'm going Kansas State. I think Colorado, they beat UCF hat tip. You're 4-1. They got the off week to extend the honeymoon. They're fine. They're not as bad as they were last year, but let's be serious here. Kansas State.
Drinking the haterade, the Dion haterade.
I don't know. I don't hate it. It's just like they're not a Big 12 contender. Like,
I'm taking Kansas State as well. I think, Avery Johnson, I've got a tweet out there that says, are we sure Avery Johnson's an upgrade? And every time he makes a mistake, I kind of bump it up there. But he's looked better since he started making those mistakes in mid-September. Looked a little better. I know that Boulder is going to be like rocking. Like that place is going to be wild, especially for a night game, welcoming Kansas State into town. But I think Kansas State is going to have a little too much beef up front. And, Dylan Edwards transferring from Colorado to Kansas State. He's going to want to run all over the Buffs. So give me the Cats over the Buffs. I'm going to take Kansas State, and we are going to take our talents out to the Pacific Northwest. Andy Backstrom on the other side of the screen. That's me, Spencer Holbrook, right here on this side of the screen. And we are Lettermen Row, Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. Go get them saucy nugs. They're so good. And then go over to Lettermen Row. Get yourself a 50% off annual membership. That's right, 50% off an annual membership at lettermenrow.com when you use the code Buckeyes. That's all you have to do. Promo code Buckeyes, 50% off an annual membership to Lettermen Row. It gets you all the way into October of next year. That means you get, let's go from the future. You get the Texas game next year. You get maybe the Washington game next year, depending on when that gets scheduled. You get all of training camp. You get the NFL draft. You get transfer portal season, spring practice. You get the national championship game that I think Ohio State could be a part of. You get the full college football playoff, Big Ten championship game, Michigan game, Penn State game. You get the ranked matchup against Indiana, and you get all the coverage for this week for the Oregon game. I don't know what else I need to say other than 50% off an annual membership to lettermenrow.com right now. Hit the like button on this video. It really helps us out. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Then go over to lettermenrow.com. Get that 50% off annual membership when you use the code Buckeyes. And then get yourself to a couch, settle in, grab a drink, and watch Ohio State and Oregon. It's going to be awesome. We'll see you guys out in Autzen Stadium on Saturday.